Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode of New Album Spotlight, the show where I put the spotlight on a new album in progressive rock that I think you guys will really enjoy if you have similar tastes in music as me. And today I have a really interesting one because it's a brand new band. This is their debut record. The band is called Sykofant, and they sent me this album a few months ago, so I've had some time with it and time to develop my thoughts about it. But the album officially releases on May 31st, on this Friday. This is a band from the vibrant Norwegian prog rock scene, which has brought about a lot of my favorite prog bands in the modern age. So this is a really exciting band, a really exciting scene of music to draw from. And what I found interesting about them is that they're not really purely just progressive rock. I felt like there was much more touchstones to like the classic rock world. For example, you hear a lot of Led Zeppelin, a lot of Cream, maybe some early Rush sounds. These are kind of the touchstones that I think they build their foundation upon. Then they add a lot of Pink Floyd kind of psychedelic flavor. You get a little bit of Rush and of Yes and those types of artists. And what results is a really interesting, fascinating stew of classic music. And I found that the production threw me off a little bit at first because it's a little bit raw and unpolished. And sometimes I like more newer production for some of these new albums. But I think it really adds to the charm of the release because it almost sounds like it could be plucked straight out of the 70s, which is where it's really heavily influenced by. So I think it fits in an interesting way, and I think it's a really cool touch to the album in retrospect. And I also equate this band a little bit with some of the more modern jam bands, something like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, because they have a bit of that flavor where they just go into these long extended passages where they just jam out and get into these like really long laid back psychedelic grooves as well. Something you'd hear from Pink Floyd, for example. So it really makes for a really cool eclectic stew of influences and things coming to the table. There's 6 tracks here. Many of them are pretty extended tracks that go pretty close to the 10-minute mark or beyond. But it gives them a lot of room to play around with, and I think it creates for a really colorful, interesting group of songs here. First, you get Pavement of Colors, which has a bit of a cool bass groove and jazz-tinged guitar work before the vocals come in. Once again, we have a classic rock riff. And the vocalist has a bit of a raw sound to his voice, but it's really interesting and I think fits this feel for this music really well. Between Air and Water is when you really get into that Pink Floyd type style. It's a really laid back Floydian groove with some really great guitar soloing, leading to a bit of a more upbeat section with some really cool riffs, ending with a big jam session where the band's able to let loose and really be able to play fiercely in their instruments. So it's a really cool extended track that gives you a cool smattering of what the band's all about. Memories of Old has another slow kind of build up to it before it starts to ramp up with some excellent energy in the guitar playing and solid bass work. We get some classic hard rock flair, some almost funky territory is explored as well. Which is also explored in the second half of Between the Moments, which starts off a little bit more somber in tone and reflective before it really becomes this funky classic rock jam that I just absolutely love. I think it's a lot of fun. Strangers is one of my favorite tracks as well because it starts off in the typical kind of jammy guitar riff driven music that you've come to expect, but then it takes a little bit of a turn. First off with a bit of a darker vibe and a heavier kind of Tool Opeth or Mastodon inspired section that's really interesting, but then it moves into a totally different direction with a bit of a surf rock feel, a spaghetti western vibe, a fun diversion, and then moves into some darker atmospherics towards the end. So it showcases a lot of their diversity and the different kinds of genres they're willing to weave in and out of, but it never feels like totally jarring. It feels like it's a journey that makes sense from one thing to the next, and just that cool spaghetti western vibe is really one of my favorite parts of the whole record and one of the most unique things that I've heard this year. So it's a really cool piece of music leading into the big epic finale, Forgotten Paths, which opens with a bit of a bright pastoral type feel with acoustic guitar and vocals before we get a shift about 4 minutes in with some cool repeated guitar riffs and thudding bass and bright acoustic guitar lines. A psychedelic haze washes over the music with a Floydian guitar line. We get almost a southern rock flavor at points where the slide guitar kind of comes in and gives it a cool funky swagger. We get a proggy bit that almost reminds me of like classic Genesis at moments. And then you get things ramping up towards the end, towards a high-octane, classic rock-driven finale that's really fun. And I really enjoyed this album. I think it's really gonna appeal to fans of classic rock of the 70s with little light prog touches. If you like extended jam sessions, if you like these 10 to 15 minute songs where the band just is able to play out and really showcase their skills, I think there's a lot to enjoy in that sort of an arena. And this is a debut record, so yeah, it's maybe a bit raw and unpolished, as I mentioned, especially in the production and some of the playing. But I think it's going to be a band that is one to watch, to see them develop and to get more experience and to be able to showcase what they're all about and to bring a bit more of their own personality and flavor into the mix. And I think that could be something to watch for in the future. So really cool album. I've really been enjoying it, and I think most of you will really find something out of this to really love as well. So thank you guys for joining me on this review, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. So thank you guys, and I'll catch you hopefully in a future episode. Bye everybody.